Turning to Matthew, the 26th chapter, beginning to read with verse 47. And while he yet spoke, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came with him, a great multitude with swords and clubs, from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whosoever I shall kiss, that same is he. Hold him fast. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master! And he kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, why art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew the sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. Then said Jesus unto him, Put up again thy sword into place. For all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? But now then shall the scripture be filled, that thus it must be. May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. None of us like to hear the word no. Somehow that just has a kind of a negative connotation. When a child comes to a parent and requests something, they do not like the answer no. I don't quite understand that, but I was there once as well. We don't like the word no. We don't like the word no when God speaks. And there are times when God says no in our lives. And we would like to argue with God a little bit and say, now wait a minute, can't you budge a little bit? Can't you compromise with me just a little bit? Dr. Engel tells this story. He tells the story of being up on the West Coast, and for some of you no doubt have driven Highway number 1 that goes along the coast from California clear to Washington. And I understand it's a beautiful drive. I've never driven it. And he says, as we were moving along, suddenly I saw a long line of cars stopping on the highway. And I arrived and stopped my car and turned off the ignition and turned down the windows. And other cars were parking behind me, and it was a half an hour that we waited until slowly we started moving. We wondered if there had been a wreck up there, or whether the bridge was out, or what was going on. But as we slowly moved on, and as we came to a certain spot, there was a patrolman, and there were a few people standing there. But there was no evidence of any wreck or any bridge or any reason for this to have stopped. And so we had to move on. And he says, I am sure that all of us were wondering what really happened here. Do you sometimes wonder what happens and why it happens? Why is it that here is a young person who is enjoying the zest of life, who is thrilled with life, who has all the opportunities in front of them, and suddenly they have been stricken with something, or an accident has occurred. And we ask why? Why, when there are people who are 100 years old, why are they allowed to live 100 years? I visited with somebody this week, I don't think in this community, but one person came to me and says, when I get to heaven, and I think the person was talking about a relative that had passed away quite early in life. And she said, I want to talk to God why that happened, and why it wasn't allowed to. Then there's the man who had 3 young children, and for whatever reason chose to kill his 3 children. Why? We don't understand that. And I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago when you had some people watching a soccer game and the father didn't like what was going on and he expressed himself quite openly, and another father decided that he was going to take an opposition to his viewpoint, and before it was all over, one of them got killed. Over a soccer game. Why would we do that as human beings? And God, why did you even allow this to happen? And then I think of the disciples as Mary came to wash Jesus' feet. And the disciples said, whoa, wait a minute, you're spending some high-priced ointment here, that spices that could be used otherwise. And Jesus said, just leave her alone. And she spent that. Life has some difficulties to understand what is happening and why does it happen. And why did God allow it to happen? And then when he had the 5,000 before him, and the disciples said, let's send them home. They can listen to you, sir. You already talked to them for half an hour, I'm adding that to the scripture, by the way, just in case you didn't know this. And why do they have to stay here? And so Jesus said, no, just let them sit down. And they go and find a young boy's little picnic basket, and he shares it with them. And he feeds them all. Why is he doing all this? Life seems somewhat difficult to understand. And we seem to struggle. And if your soul hasn't at some time or another been staggered to such a degree that you raise questions and say, oh God, why? Why did this happen? And tears roll down your cheeks because of it. And you wonder, as a fox when it's caught in its trap, never seen it, but I've been told that it will gnaw at its foot where it is in the steel trap until he's got that leg chewed off, and then he can run on into his activities. We all come to a place in life when we feel that life is rather difficult. It is Gideon who's out on the threshing floor, and as he is trying to thresh out his wheat, and his oxen have been taken by the Midianites, and he doesn't want the dust to fly too high, he's hidden there. And an angel comes and said, God is interested in you, Gideon. Now I just want to read this so I don't think it'll be more appropriate. The angel said, the Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles which our fathers told us about? How they took us across the Red Sea and brought us out of Egypt. But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. Gideon just can't understand this. He doesn't understand what has happened to his own people, to his own land, and said, why? He said, look over at Escalon. Escalon was covered with people, and threshing floors were all over, and oxen were tramping out the wheat. And today you don't see